And the next video shows Jade and I performing together. In this clip, she puts her hand on my shoulder. We look at each other. She walks around my wheelchair, crossing both in front of and beside me. They hold it. They're holding me, my increasingly motionless self. Is that not enough for them? I learned to live like this. I turned grief into motion, and I built myself a life. Thanks to my carers. Wiping my ass without scrubbing away my dignity. And this slide just has two images on it. One with Jade walking in front of me as we look at each other, and the other with her hand on my shoulder, me looking at her and her at me. And to me, those images really capture the multidimensional nature of the relationship we established. It didn't feel like we were flat faces on a screen. It felt like we were embodied people with the freedom to move in, through, and out of the space, to physically connect, to contact each other, and to withdraw. One of the things I found most interesting about this was how real it felt. And that sounds strange, I'm aware. Obviously, we weren't in the same place, and yet when she reached out and touched me, and I could see on the monitors that she was touching my shoulder, I could almost have believed that my shoulder was being touched, even though I was the only one on stage. Somehow, being able to see my movements live on the monitor screen as I worked meant that when I could see Jade and I in the environment I was in, it felt natural to believe she was there. Prior to this, I might have thought there was no real need for intimacy coordination with remote work, but having done this and realised how personal it felt, I think I would have felt strange if she'd reached out to touch me without checking first in some way, even though we were on different continents. The fact that the monitors weren't perfectly synchronous meant there was a slight delay, and this made some of the movement rehearsal quite challenging. The ability for Jade and my bodies to connect in physical space relied on us both knowing exactly where to put our limbs at what moment in a three-dimensional empty space. And in the last part of this presentation, I'm going to explore some of the challenges, successes, and disability-specific learnings, and think about what's next for the show and our telepresence work. This slide is another photo from my show. It shows me in a hoist sling on stage, dangling from a hoist, wearing a silver t-shirt and no trousers, my catheter bag on display. My wheelchair is empty beside me, and projected behind me is the phrase, "I'm gay," in large letters on a screen. So let's begin with the successes. In the background of this slide is another image from the beginning of my show. My face similar to the clip where it appeared on the doctors' faces, but here the doctors have their own faces, and I'm spotlit in the dark. The key successes I found were the proof of concept that telepresence would work for us, that you could perform from different places, that you could integrate live and pre-recorded work, the interactivity of captions, and the various creative ways to enhance the show. And the key successes from the project for me were also that we learned more about the technology, the directions for development, and even that we applied some of the confidence, even if not these exact skills. By the end, we felt like we had a proof of concept, and that we were using tools and technology we could carry forward with the show and our other work, that we could deliver a high quality performance from lots of spaces, and that we could work in more accessible ways, because we had the knowledge and expertise to bring performers into a virtual space if we couldn't in a physical one. And even last minute in a theatre, this could allow for someone to be projected onto a screen and still be on stage, even if they couldn't be there. The pre-recorded British Sign Language actually also worked a lot better than I'd been worried it would. It wasn't perfect, but it really showed that with the right show in the right way, this can be done. And it shouldn't replace having a deaf signer performing live alongside me, which is still the way I want to deliver this work. But it would allow for me to put in that layer of accessibility in the digital contingency version of the show, if I chose to. I thought the creative worlds that were made were fantastic. Being able to perform live on a virtual stage, but also be in Zoom, shifting environments, building and moving captions, destroying them, interacting with them. Because everything is virtual, it somehow made the space feel more interactive than a physical stage would. And the final success was that application of confidence around digital work to our 2024 show at the Barbican, The Acts. When during show week one of the performers developed COVID, we had to swap from in-person rehearsals with them, but they still felt well enough to perform and wanted to do so. Eventually we could record a filmed version of their part, which we projected onto fabric hanging down from the ceiling. It wasn't about the technology from the telepresence project, the video was pre-recorded, but it was about the fact that we believed we could make it work, which was so powerful. And it allowed us to take forward those learnings to make the show happen in a way that was as accessible as possible and without losing a performer at the last minute. So there were a number of challenges on the project that related kind of more specifically to access. Finding a space that met project demands, setting up a green screen with wheelchair-safe floor coverage, the amount of equipment, the physical barriers in the space, the ways in which the green screen technology didn't recognise the outlines of a disabled person, the technical learning curve, and the difficulties around hearing impairment. This image shows me in the telepresence space in my wheelchair, not the virtual stage, but the actual physical space I was in. My wheelchair is on green flooring. I'm on the left of the image, and on the right there are two monitors. On those monitors, Jade, the Singaporean performer, appears with her hand on my shoulder, even though when you look at me on the left, it's clear that she is not here with me. There are bright lights pointed at me, and everywhere is surrounded by tripods, lines, and wires, which really shows how difficult it was to find a space that would be accessible for a project like this. One of the things I really took away from the difficulties I had communicating with Jade was just that I should have taken more time to explore both of our access needs and make sure we had what we needed in place. However, it was an absolute delight to work with her, and by the end of the rehearsals, I felt we had a really productive, satisfying synchronicity that meant we were working together really excellently. And having talked about those challenges, there were certainly disability-specific learnings to take forward in the future development of this work as well, alongside things to consider when creating other new work. The main learnings we identified were that equipment setup requires more time to make it safe for wheelchair users, and that this time needs to be allocated ahead of rehearsals so we know what we're doing. That accessible work takes more time in general, and that more time needs to be allocated to doing it than we had done. That people may have different access requirements when working with new technologies, and we need time to gather those requirements and meet them. And that when working with neurodivergent people and complex software, tools or equipment, we really need clear, simple, illustrated instructions. The image on this slide shows me in my wheelchair parked in front of and on the green screen. To the right of the image is a monitor, and on that is a tiny bit of footage, but the focus of the image is the scale of the green screen and on what I look like placed on it. I chose it because it gives a sense of how trapped I was in the space once everything was set up around me, but also a sense of the size of the screen we needed. That was the smallest I think we could have gone, while still being able to have me surrounded well enough to capture the footage. And my wheelchair's wheels, as you can see by the creases, kept pulling up the fabric as I drove over it. This, of course, is why many electric wheelchair users don't have rugs at home. But because of this challenge, I had to stay still as much as possible, rather than moving the chair around the space. While every piece of software has a manual, many have very steep learning curves, and I think creating a pack with some simple, clear, illustrated instructions for using tools like vmix to create a virtual stage, that would have been really helpful for us. Because as a team, I think there were times when we kind of struggled to learn all of that. And as I come to the end of my talk, I just want to think a bit about what's next. So the image for this slide is from behind the lights and cameras. Al, our lighting designer, is working on a laptop. Between the laptop and the green screen, where I am, you can see the obstacle course of monitors and lights and wires that left me pinned into the small space at the end. In terms of what we'd do next, with enough time and money, I think we would develop video layers for the whole show, so the lead performer could appear with just head and shoulders, performing from bed, for example. We would integrate live audience elements, like voting and commenting that could appear on the virtual screen. We would create BSL and caption layers for the full show. We would record and develop it in a studio that had green screen painted walls and floors and safe cable management for safety, so I could really explore movement freely. And probably also get a camera compatible teleprompter and monitor specifically for live captions to try and manage and prevent previous issues arising. Developing those video layers is probably the most important next step, because it's one of the key elements of making sure the show could be performed live from almost anywhere. But the audience interaction elements do also excite me. Could they vote on what characters do? Could their comments appear on stage? Could they be writing in and it coming up on screen? Finding ways for it to work effectively on a virtual stage is something I'd love to explore. And I'd also really like to create the BSL and captioned layers for the full show. I was really pleased and excited by the work that DL and I had done and the potential for integrating captions, because having both of these fully embedded would be fantastic. However, when DL and I worked on a small section, it took about 3 days to translate 3 minutes of the show. We rewrote all the text to work fluently in both languages, but I think we'd be a lot quicker now doing it because we have established that process. Overall, there was a lot to learn, I guess, in this, but there was a lot that we took away, and I'm really happy about what we've achieved. This final slide shows me on the bottom right in silver t-shirt with a blanket over my legs, seated in my electric wheelchair. Behind me is the text, "Quality of life isn't a measurable outcome." Superimposed on top is the cryptic logo and the text, "Thank you."
Thank you to Jamie Hale for pulling that presentation together. I think that it's a lot to unpack. There's a huge amount of layers and elements to that piece that that you've produced. And Jane, I think you were going to talk a bit about how it goes beyond access.
Yeah, I mean, I think across that and the Bird of Paradise piece, just the way both companies have used telepresence and embedded it from the start as a creative tool, rather than something that's kind of access being layered on afterwards, has been really, really important. And it's, I think there's a number of things that come through in the presentations for me. Partly the kind of hybrid possibilities in multiple locations, and that these pieces that both theatre companies have made aren't live performances in a theatre that you can access remotely. All the locations are equally valued, and then that kind of possibilities for audience experience, which I think Birds of Paradise Peter described as embodied and immersive. And I think Jamie, they really talk about it where you become, the audience actually becomes implicit in the piece when they get kind of sucked into the Zoom, which is something that feels like it's only possible working kind of in this way. And then I think just lastly, I just wanted to pick up on Jamie's point about the intimacy of that they felt in the work with Jade, who was on another continent, and I wasn't actually there for when they filmed that scene, but I've watched the recordings of it, and I could really feel that in the kind of care and time and attention that was taken in how and where Jade placed her hand and how Jamie interacted with that, which was actually really moving to watch and kind of really surprised me in a piece that that you're kind of viewing remotely. So I felt that was a really integral and really important part of the work.
Yeah. It's I encourage everyone to see the piece. Paul, we're sort of, as we wrap up, I just wanted to ask you what you've learnt from working with Cryptic and with Birds of Paradise.
Yeah.
How that's what's next?
Absolutely, really exciting things. I mean, it's so much. We've learnt so much from this project, working with these two companies, and how they've approached it. And I think one of the things the sorts of things that Jamie was talking about at the end, I think is really important for the kind of studios of the future that we need, the kind of environments we need. Like here at FACT, we're in a centre of technology and media, but we need spaces where people can go in and use these facilities in a way that is accessible. The sort of green screening environments, the sound, we can see it here. We're surrounded by a lot of cables here as much as we can be, but we've avoided things as much as we can do. But we need to design that around the inclusion of everybody that can take part. And I think it's what's really important. What Bob really picked up on was that it's the inclusion of the performers who are remote, who don't have to travel to that location, but they can come in from anywhere in Scotland where their main focus is. But they also get the inclusion of the audience. The audiences don't have to travel to Glasgow and see those works. They can see it from multiple places, but in so many more better ways than you can on Zoom or other kinds of online tools. But to really be in that space, be in that performance space with those people. And that was the bit that Jamie was really talking about, that almost that epiphany moment, that eureka moment where he suddenly thought, wow, I feel like Jade and I are in the same place. That is incredible, that moment that happens, and then everything suddenly unfolds and you sort of think about all these things that could happen. And so this project comes to an end at the end of this month. So this is really our sort of culminating event, really. But there's so much to take away and include in our case studies on these two projects, which will add to our other 9 case studies we have from other theatre companies using telepresence. And they're all available on our website. And those resources, they are there. We just need to get them out now and people can use them and start to develop them. But I do hope, particularly, I'm in conversation with Jamie already about what happens next and the next project we want to do.
Fantastic.
Great.
That's great. Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience at this point before we come to a close? Emma?
Do we have any online questions?
Hi, I'm Emma. I'm a white woman in my 20s with long blonde hair, and I'm wearing a grey cardigan and a white face mask. Thank you so much. I think it's really exciting opportunities that having a different form or way of presenting theatre online for accessibility. And as you know, post-COVID, there are less online opportunities for theatre. I was wondering whether there's any, what you thought of the challenges or opportunities of working hybrid, so having a performer in the space while also having the recording or a telepresence behind them, and what the differences could be between what people see online versus what the people see in the room. Whether for example, audio description, how that would work if things are different, and what you saw of that relationship being going forward.
I can try and answer a bit of that. It's a really, really good question and very important, and it's really something that Cryptic Arts, Jamie Hale, really wanted to develop, work on. That whole idea of what hybrid performance looks like, online and in theatre hybrid. And I think Jamie touches on it at the end of his presentation, which is also the challenges in doing that are also about the institutions we can work in, the environments and places we can work in, the theatres need to be ready for that. Actually, there's new jobs, actually, what Jane was referring to earlier on. There's new employment, new opportunities for people, for creative theatre people to work in this area, to bring about those kinds of online hybrid experiences. You know, productions, there's so many people involved in a production. There are some missing key people in all of that, I think, that can play a part. But yeah, I think the important thing is not, my own belief is, don't do it the way the National Theatre did it. Unfortunately, the way the Arts Council ploughed money into it, don't do it that way. Don't turn it into TV, because we've got TV already. And don't just sort of show us a film of the theatre, make it different, make it another experience. Let's have transmedia experiences of theatre. One may be on stage, one may be online, one may be through an app or any other sorts of things, but it might be multiple ways of experiencing that story, which is so much more exciting than just sort of getting another sort of televised version of a theatre piece. That's kind of my challenge to that question, I think.
Thank you. I wonder how you thought the audience interaction could also factor in that, with audience obviously in person, also online. As Jamie mentioned, people could vote. I wonder if you'd had any conversations around how that could work in the future, or if, for example, I was thinking, could the performers be on the Zoom call as well, and could the technology mean they brought in on that as well? Yeah.
Absolutely, they can, and that's the way to go. In that, Jamie was talking about that at the end. I mean, one of Jamie's challenges is that he can be in a position where it's not possible to get to the stage. He he can't move, and just a head and shoulder shot is all you're going to get at that point. But the show can go on because we can use that in different situations, and that may be the case for all sorts of different people in different situations. Today we're doing. You can see with the BSL today, we're not using green screen. We're using background segmentation, which is an AI or machine learning technology that just takes out the background. We don't need a green screen for that. There's things like that we can do, so people don't need to have to set up green screens and complex things to be in the performance. They could be at home, online, taking part with other technologies that can do that. One of the things during the pandemic, one of the pluses that we got was that there was so much new technology was being developed. Actually, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of new ideas were taking place. That's so sad that that's just dried up, and we're now looking at, we sort of, let's go back to the way we did it before, or let's just. The AI discussion has kind of taken over, and it's all very visual wallpaper, really, but it's not innovative in terms of inclusion and participation as it could be.
Thanks. Any more, Liz?
Hi, I'm Liz. I'm a white woman in her latter part of the years, wearing glasses and a flowery dress. I was actually what Jamie was saying at the end about spaces. It really, really does have implications for theatre companies and where you go on tour, to kind of really understand how you might set up all that hybrid experience. It would be fantastic to think that if a performer who might not be able to perform on one night could be, incorporated in a pre-recorded show. But this has a huge amount of sort of like implications, doesn't it, for understanding the scale of the size of the venues that you perform in and the actual setup of your set. And with that, how do you... That's sort of one side of thing that I'm thinking about, but how do you look at scale? I'm visually impaired, and it's quite interesting for me when you have recorded actors on stage, because it can be sort of magnified to show people's facial expressions. But if you're trying to incorporate a pre-recorded performance and a live performance to try and show scale in a sort of human scale, inverted commas, how do you sort of do that to sort of get the scale right every time? There's a lot in that sort of questions, but I'm sort of thinking about how do you play with scale and what does that mean in terms of human scale or magnification, etc.
Well, a lot of the pilot case studies play with scale a lot, don't they, Paul? There's a lot of kind of toying with the idea of scale and people at different performing together, but in relation to scale, one being kind of very small and one being very large, and the possibilities are kind of endless, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, and there's some of the. I mean, I think there is again, theatre requires a lot of not just change, but the way theatre tends to think. I think it needs to also needs to move forward or adapt or bring about new kinds of opportunities within it. Some theatres can do that. Some theatres can't or don't want to. Right? Maybe. I think but it's not just the theatre. It's also people who relate to that earlier question. It's also people who are at home taking part. Audience participation, whether it's recorded or whether it's remote. A lot of people are restricted to the size of the space that they can work in. Most rooms, you don't get much rooms that are bigger than 2.5 to 3 meters wide. So that's the sort of limit you're kind of working with. But some people worked with multiples with different scales, as Colin was saying, and then we did things with rostrum cameras, and people performed with their hands underneath the camera, so you had very sort of large hands involved in a performance as well. So the scale was quite different. We could have zoomed in shots and out shots that are zoomed out. It could be all sorts of ways. I mean, maybe there's ways of offering audiences opportunities to zoom in and zoom out themselves into some of these cameras, some of these shots. So you could say, oh, well, I want to go closer in on that particular performer. I want to zoom in or I want to zoom out. Maybe there's ways of having different experiences for different people. They want to have different, depending on how you want to view it. I remember.
I'm just thinking as well, just hearing you talk about that maybe that offers opportunities within a theatre as well as for remote viewers, because you do have different seating and people can see different things, and if you could zoom in and out or have other ways of accessing it within the theatre as well, that may address some of that and also access issues within a theatre as well.
Yeah. There could be different. I mean, one of the. I remember years ago. And now the artist, I can't remember the artist's name, but there was a drama that was a German production, a drama that was on television on 2 different channels, and you could switch channels and get different views of the dialogue between the people.
Right.
So actually, with the viewer had the choice of whether they wanted to listen to it from one person's point of view or the other person's point of view, and they could switch between the two. And maybe there's ways we can play with this. This is all live. So there's no reason why we can't explore those kinds of things and have multiple channels for experiencing things differently. It could also be in different languages, of course. We can have different audio description in different languages, just as a soundtrack. So we can do it in all sorts of other ways. Narratives, the kind of script can be revealed in different ways according to the viewer's choice or interaction.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks. We've gone slightly over time, so I kind of feel we should bring it to a close now. And thank you to FACT for giving us their space, and to Dada for allowing us, hosting us here.
And thank you to you, Colin, and Disability Arts Online, and to Joe and Kate and Trish and all the team here. Thank you so much for bringing it together.
And after the lunch break, there's going to be a live demonstration as well with the Birds of Paradise.
Exactly.
piece.
We'll demo the Birds of Paradise project. It'll be offline, I'm afraid, this one, but it will be a more informal opportunity for people to gain some technical knowledge and exchange of ideas in the workshop this afternoon.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming.